多謝大家。
Welcome to today's press conference. We have with us the Secretary for Culture, Sports and Tourism, Mr. Kevin Yeung, Secretary for Labor and Welfare, Mr. Chris Sun, Chairperson of the Task Force on Investigation of Mirror Concert Incident, Mr. Lee Ji-chun, Expert Advisor Dr. Eric Lim, and Assistant Commissioner of the Labor Department, Mr. Chen Ka-lai. There will be an opening remark, and then the task force will talk about the report before we have the question and answer session. On the 28th of July, there was a mirror concert in the Hong Kong Coliseum. A number of people have been injured. One is still in hospital. It has drawn public attention and concern. We send our good wishes to those who have been injured, and we have engaged a task force to look into the investigation, to look at the causes and prevention measures. And the police as well as the Labor Department will look at whether anyone has contravened the laws of Hong Kong. This morning, the police has made some arrests, and you have already heard from them. The LCSD task force has completed their work, and I will quickly go over the focus of the investigation before I defer to the Labor Department for details. Well, the LCSD has set down terms and conditions for hire of various venues for parties to hold different activities, say for example concerts. The task force has looked into the matter and conducted an investigation. They have held 9 meetings. They have studied the findings of laboratory examinations of the foreign LED panel, stage equipment and related installation, the quality and strength of wire ropes and eye bolts. They have reached a conclusion saying that they have violated certain terms and conditions. Under Article 15 of the Terms and Conditions of Hire, the hirer should provide accurate details of proposed arrangements. However, the information, such as the weight information of the LED panel submitted, was not accurate, and the safety factor has been inflated. Under another article, it stipulates that the hirer should hire qualified professionals to certify that erection, installation, rigging, or suspension of any structure or equipment are carried out by skilled workers to a standard accepted by the trade, and that they are sound and safe, and they have been checked by qualified professionals or authorized person. The falling of the LED panel proved that the installation was not safe and sound. So it shows that the hirer has not complied with the conditions and terms of hire. The matter has been forwarded to the police for follow-up. I will now defer to the expert advisor of the task force, Dr. Eric Lim, to go into details before Mr. Lee Ji-chun gives you further details. Good afternoon, everyone. And I have already met you, and on the last occasion I have explained about some technical issues, and I will now give you some more information on technical aspects. We have this frame, we have the winch system suspending the LED panel. There is one wire rope that's broken and the other one still hanging on. Well, when the wire rope broke, the LED panel started to sink and swing. In the entire process, we have this fact that there is one wire rope broken, and we can see that this is one end where the breaking has occurred, and I have already spoken to you about an important fact, which is metal fatigue. You could see that these marks shows signs of fatigue. It has to be magnified to be able for identification. Metal fatigue is important because of the effect of the rope guard installation. Normally, when the winch has been installed, there will be a rope guard system to make sure that they are in order and that they will not jump out. Normally, you could see that the coating is intact because it has not been in touch with the rope wire. But at the site, we see that because the ropes have been pressing against the rope guard, causing friction. And it's difficult for the rope guard to rotate. And when it's pressed upon, it would move, causing the scratch. Well, this is the rope guard at the site. The coating has completely been worn off. Well, apart from metal fatigue, you could see that the rope itself has been deformed. It's been subject to pressure and become deformed. Apart from metal fatigue, there are other reasons. The loading of the wire rope was over capacity. If something is heavier than the design capacity, then the resistance against metal fatigue would be reduced as well. All these factors come into play, causing the wire rope to suffer from the metal fatigue within a very short time. When one side of the rope has snapped, there is still an eye bolt attached to the other rope that's intact. At the site, as you can see, that this is the site where it's snapped, but the eye bolt has bent. The reason is that with the bolt extending or protruding from the frame will affect the installation. But there is something called a turnbuckle. The turnbuckle is there to adjust the length of the wire rope for leveling. Without this turnbuckle, then the bolt has to be further extended to adjust the leveling of the LED. But when it's adjusted to a certain extent, in this case, protruding excessively, then it would be subject to very large bending moment. The effect of the bending moment is so large that the bolt would snap. And that's all I want to share with you in terms of technical aspects.
Over to Mr. Lee. Thank you, Dr. Lim, who has just outlined the cause of the incident to us. And the task of the task force is to find out the causes and make recommendations. And we have made a number of recommendations to strengthen the current system. Now, under the current mechanism, we would like to more clearly set out the roles and duties of all parties concerned, and the early engagement of the authorized person should monitor the design and implementation of the stage plan. And we would require proof load tests for all motional and evaluating machinery. The hirers will have to ensure that the accurate weight of the bringing instruction equipment is given, and there should be a mill test certificate for steel wire ropes submitted to ensure that they are sufficient to withstand the load. And Dr. Lim mentioned that some of the rope wires were not in a desirable condition, will require hirers to submit mill test certificate for wheel wire ropes. Therefore, to ensure that the wire ropes are of the desired quality. And all motional and elevating machinery will have to provide a proof load test. And we will consider introducing a third-party independent auditor with the relevant expertise to inspect works and also installations of hirers concerned. To ensure the hirers comply with the terms and conditions and fulfill their duties, the LCSD will introduce a mechanism to deal with hirers who breach the terms and conditions of hire. For serious violations of the terms and conditions, LCSD may take action and impose sanctions. Will encourage organizers to carry out drill rehearsals well before the actual performance to avoid the possibility of accidents. LCSD will discuss with the performing industry these proposed recommendations before introducing them in our venues. And prior to that, hirers in using LCSD venues will comply with the 3 interim measures adopted since the incident or other measures that the LCSD consider sufficient to safeguard the safety of performers and the audience. Secretary. Now, we hope that with these enhanced measures, hirers can comply with the terms and conditions of hire, enhance the safety of stage to safeguard the safety of the audience and performers. We are going to publish the detailed investigation report today, and the coming few months we will work out with the industry the actual implementation of these recommendations. As said by Mr. Lee, prior to the introduction of enhanced measures, industry players are required to follow the 3 interim measures adopted since August or adopt other measures approved by the LCSD. The task force has completed its work and made recommendations, and the police will continue to investigate to see whether there is any breach of the laws of Hong Kong or other regulations and take enforcement. I apologize, I send my good wishes to the injured in this accident, and I thank the task force members for carrying out the work. In the past decades, we have had numerous concerts and performances at LCSD venues. All hirers and the industry were able to comply with terms and conditions, and they showcase a very spectacular shows for the enjoyment of the audience. Now, we were indeed very shocked by this incident, and they're of the view that that was just an isolated incident that doesn't impact on the overall standard of the industry. We will not spare those who have violated the rules in this case. Thank you. Mr. Xun, Secretary for Labor and Welfare. Thank you. The work of the Labor and Welfare Bureau is, after consulting the Department of Justice, make an assessment whether the injured dancers were self-employed persons or employees. Now, on the 28th of July, at the concert, there was that incident, and also, actually, there was another accident on the 15th of July during the rehearsal. Now, the Labor Department has considered information related to the terms of employment of the dancers concerned. After consultation with the DFJ, which has made reference to judgment by the Court of Final Appeal in 2006, there was an important guiding case to determine whether a person is self-employed or employed. There are broad principles, and after examining the relevant evidence and Labor Department, after consulting DOJ and with evidence in hand, we are of the view that the dancers concerned were taking part in the show as employees. So we have done a lot of research and considered all evidence, and we are quite confident to come to the conclusion or judgment that the dancers were there as employees. That being the case, under two relevant pieces of legislation, the Labor Department would take action. First is CAP 509, Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, and second is CAP 282, Employment Compensation Employee Compensation Ordinance. Now, as far as CAP 509 is concerned, that is Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, the Labor Department would consider prosecuting one, the employer, i.e. the company that employed the dancers, and second, occupants of the venue, including the contractor. We would consider whether they have provided a safe work environment and whether the employer has provided a safe work environment for employees. We will follow very seriously. According to information we have, and after consulting the DOJ, we will come to a decision whether to prosecute or not very soon. And then under CAP 252, that is Employee Compensation Ordinance. Now, there are two things under the ordinance. First, whether the employer has taken out employment compensation insurance. And second, when there is an injury at work, whether the employer has reported to the Labor Department during the specified time. Under the relevant legislation, we will take action against the employer of the dancers. That is, the employer has not reported the injury at work to the Labor Department, neither has it taken out insurance for its employees. We'll now take questions. Please identify your media outlet and please ask two questions at a time. The gentleman in blue. Yes.
報嘅，想問第一條問題係，因為警方今日都話即係涉事嘅單位都因為交文件就
This is Ming Pao.
問翻一般演。
Well, you talk about arrests having been made. So, in general, when will the documents be submitted to the LCSD? And on what date did Engineering Impact Limited submit the documents? And when was approval given by the LCSD? Secondly, in the investigation by the police, they found that there was excessive, there was overweight of some installations, some to 7 times. In the certification and investigation, did anyone carry out any assessment in checking out the, in giving the approval? Was there any tests done? Would anyone be held responsible for giving the approval? I think you're asking about documents and the hiring of the Coliseum. You're asking about procedure. We all, as you all understand, that the LCSD is the manager or owner of the Coliseum. There are terms and conditions set down for hirers. The venue may be used for different activities, say for example the snookers championship or concerts. Because of the diverse use, the stage and facilities or installations erected or installed is down to the hirer. The terms and conditions set out very clearly that the hirer should make sure that the installations brought in, say for example the stage and suspension, should be safe and sound. That is their first and foremost responsibility. We require them to hire professionals to certify that these installations are safe, sound, And in the terms and conditions, it is required that the installation has to meet acceptable standard of the trade. As I said at the end of my speech, in the past few decades, we have followed the same procedures, and the Colosseum has seen many brilliant shows with different stage designs and arrangements. Of course, there are many views from the trade subsequent to this incident. We have heard that. Many people said that had they been the one in charge of the work, this would not have had happened. But we could see that the hirer has not complied with relevant requirements as I have outlined. And that is where the problem lies in our view. As to when submissions were made, I would defer to the Assistant Commissioner. But we have indeed received all documents, including those from professionals stating that these installations have been inspected before we allow the activity to go ahead. Assistant Commissioner, let me add that there are many plans and documents submitted in relation to an event. We would provide assistance to the organizer, and we would accept submissions of documents by stages. I think you're talking about the suspension system. It was submitted in mid-July, and we spent 5 or 6 days to vet it before giving the approval. Let me go into details. There are suspension systems. There was no stage. The organizer designed the stage to end. They should ensure that the installation would be carried out in a safe and sound manner and would meet standards. When the plans were submitted, what we looked at was the weight of the object to be suspended from the roof and whether it would meet loading capacity. The information submitted was in order, and based on the calculations, everything seemed to be safe. And sometimes, at the last minute, they would add objects, say another speaker or another light. In this circumstance, they would have to make submissions for our approval. We would assist them as far as possible so that they would get the approval. On the 22nd of July, they have submitted some amendments. It's not a complete change of the plan. And we have swiftly made calculations and found that it met standards. It's not the case that they have changed to a large scale. The plans they have already submitted is not the case. The one in white, I'm from Now TV. First, well, did the LCSD think that they have been diddled? And if that is the case, do you think that the LCSD would still have to be held responsible? One of the recommendations is that there should be a third party to do the audit. What's the difference between the auditor being the government or a third party? And what about responsibility and liability? For the parties and companies involved, would they be subject to any penalty because they are still engaged in some other works? And have you missed anything in terms of liability? The investigation conducted by the LCSD is in relation to an incident involving a falling LED panel and onto someone or some people. As our expert advisor explained, he has explained about the causes of the snapping of the wire rope. recommendations are made to prevent a reoccurrence. We would enhance requirements set down in the terms and conditions of hire. As the Assistant Commissioner has said, we would look into whether there is a need to require an independent auditor. We would also look into possible enhancement of penalties for repeated violations. We want hirers to follow in full and comply with the terms and conditions. The information submitted on this occasion was erroneous. Under Article 15, well, there was a requirement that the information submitted has to be accurate. And as to the reason whether fraud is involved, it's under investigation by the police. But the submission of inaccurate information is a fact. And because of this fact, we see that the hirer has contravened the terms and conditions and will have to be held responsible. As I said at the outset, the task force looked into the causes of the falling of the LED panel, and they have come up with some recommendations. The two departments would carry out subsequent investigations if they found that the LCSD has to do more in terms of the terms and conditions, or if they have to enhance supervision. That's something that we would do.
The lady in blue in the front.
South China Morning Post. I was wondering if Mr. Yeung could clarify the responsibility of the LCSD as an overseeing body on this accident. As you've mentioned that there's a lot of trust involved in the process, that you trusted the information given, and this case is clearly showing that this did not work. So does the government believe that it has any responsibility in ensuring that the information it receives have been accurate? And second question, would Mr. Lee be able to clarify the difference between the original role of the authorized person signing off reports by tenants to rent government venues and its new proposed arrangements of an independent party to examine documents submitted by tenants, as well as elaborate on the role of the authorized person in this accident, please? Thank you.
LCSD's main responsibility in this case is the owner of the venue. And being an owner of the venue, they have set out the terms and conditions of hire for the hirer to comply with. And it set out clearly that for this type of venue, for the Hong Kong Coliseum, the hirer has to be responsible, or has to make sure that all the installation they put in at the venue has to be sound and safe. They also have to employ a qualified person or qualified professional to certify that this work or installation has been carried out properly and that the installation are safe and sound. This is a system asking the builder or installer to have an independent certification has been used in many other government projects before. But in reviewing this case, in investigating the cause of this incident, we have proposed some further amendments or further actions that the government could take or LCSD could take to ensure the further compliance of the terms and conditions by the hirer in future. and which Mr. Lee has earlier explained. This is how we are going to handle the case, so that in future we will make sure that the stage or the installation in the venue would be safe both to the performers and the audience. On the second question, I leave it to Mr. Lee. You are asking about the independent audit and what's the difference with the current system. I think at present, is the hirer has to employ a person to certify, qualified person to certify that the installation is safe and sound. In our recommendation, we will study the feasibility of having an independent audit of that system on a selective basis. So we are creating an extra checking on a selective basis to ensure that all the work are fully complied with. That's the idea of this proposal. But we will discuss further with the trade to work out the details.
好，我哋答多兩條題目。
Two more questions. The lady or the journalist in grey. Good afternoon, I'm from RTHK. In the past, you relied on terms and conditions for hire. Does that mean that in future you're going to enhance the terms and conditions? What about the monitoring role of the LCSD? Will it be enhanced? Can you be more specific? And was it a problem of the system itself, or was it human error? Now, for the proposals, will that add to the cost of future organizers, and will that require more preparation time? You've asked a number of questions. I wonder if I can remember them all. In terms of implementation, we will discuss with the industry, because as I said a number of times, we have terms and conditions for hire to manage a venue, and this system has been in place for decades. And the track record can be seen, and most organizers could comply with the terms and conditions in putting up very spectacular shows. As we all know, for this case, investigation is still in progress. The police have said today that there is no ruling out another round of operation. So you mentioned human error. Now, we have to wait for the police investigation whether it was caused by persons concerned, and we are owners of these venues. In hiring out these venues, we have our duties. We have to ensure that hirers will ensure that bring in equipment and installations do not just create a good sound and visual effect. They should also ensure the safety of performers and the audience involved, and this is a very practical consideration. We'll continue to proceed along this line. As regards Mo, now a 28-year-old youngster who is passionate about performing arts, and then in the past 3 months he has been in hospital receiving various surgeries and treatment, and it seems that his road to rehabilitation or to recovery is still long, and this is not something we'd like to see. No matter how hard we investigate the matter, we cannot or we cannot turn the clock back to undo what has happened. This is already impossible. So we wish him a speedy recovery, and the whole community should continue to support him so that he can be supported in his road to recovery. And the government has the responsibility to review the matter to see whether there is areas we can improve on to avoid a repeat of the incident and to avoid another one being hurt as a result of similar causes. The last, the lady in the second row. I'm from cable TV. Now, under the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, who should be prosecuted? Should it be the Music Nation Productions Company Limited? Why hasn't it taken on insurance for its employees? Will that affect their ability to hire government venues in the past? And then Music Nation and also Engineering Impacts are the two companies concerned. Will you require them to suspend from operation given the seriousness of the incident?
You've asked two questions. The dancers involved, we believe with certainty that they are employees. So the employer will have to have taken out employee insurance and have reported the incident. So we first have to clarify as to who the employer is. And under the Occupational Safety and Health Ordinance, the occupier of the premises will have to ensure that personnel are safe and all the installations are safe. Occupiers include contractors and production companies. But as to which party we would take action against, it depends on the evidence. So we will go through the evidence, and if need be, initiate prosecutions, and that is an action that we can take under Cap 509. Well, under Cap 509, the employer has to bear responsibility. Our work at the next stage, as you all know, that the police have taken some action and they would carry on with their investigation. There may be prosecution, there may be further action, and the case may go to the court. But before any of that happens, we can't tell where the problems lie and who is to be responsible. But we would like to remind hirers that when they look for contractors or parties to carry out works in the event, they would have to follow in full the terms and conditions we have put in place. The LCSD will, if need be, follow up certain cases in detail. That's the end of the press conference. Thank you. The speaker's off mic. Would this question be taken? Yes. Which media outlet are you from? I'm from Hong Kong 01. I'd like to ask a number of things. There are a number of recommendations. Does it mean that there are loopholes? There are plenty of loopholes. The LCSD will only look at the documents, give the approval without having to go to the site. Are they just rubber stamps? Because we're talking about an exceedance of 7 times. It's not, let's not dwell on who to do what. In the recommendations, we require qualified persons, that is, those who are knowledgeable about engineering and who are themselves qualified, should certify that the installations are safe and sound. This is a basic requirement in the terms and conditions. We would also look into whether an independent audit is required. There are many different views. Whoever takes up the task, it will have to be someone who is qualified. It's not about specifying a certain party to carry out the work. It's about the requirement in the system that a qualified person, a professional, is to carry out the work. That's very clear. That's the end of the press conference. Thank you.